Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today I'm going to make what I think I'm going to call a universal three-layer pendant. It's going to have mixed metals and it's going to feature a landscape scene. Um, there's so many different variations you could do of this one. I drew up three and I'm going to do one of them tonight. At some point I may do one of the other ones too, but I chose an ocean kind of beach scene. But you can I also drew up a mountain scene and a desert scene, and you could probably do just about anything you wanted, and it wouldn't even have to be a landscape, I wouldn't guess. But lots of room for variation here, and I think it's a good, pretty easy project. So let's get started. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get on my merch store. This particular one has information about sizing rings. It has some information, it has a little formula for making ring sizes, and it has a chart with additional information on the back about it. So some of the other ones have some other useful information like conversion charts or saw blade charts, and I think that they're pretty useful in general. This is the first project in this one because I just finished one book. I filled out 4 or 5 of them now, and ever since I started doing a YouTube channel I keep a record of everything I make, and it's really handy to have that to refer to. So get yourself 1 or 2 of these. I think it's a great way to keep track of what you've made so you don't forget. This is what we have going on today. So I'm going to make a little round pendant. It's going to be framed with 14 gauge sterling silver that it was originally 14 gauge. I flattened it a little bit in the rolling mill. You could also flatten it with a chasing hammer or something if you wanted to thin it out in one dimension. I wanted it to be sturdy but a little bit thinner from the front view, so we'll use this to make the circle. Like I said in the intro, this could be made into just about any kind of scene. I'm just doing very simple ones with like some waves, a palm tree in front of it, and the sun in the background kind of setting behind the waves. You could do a mountain scene or a desert scene, but for time's sake I'm just going to do one, and you certainly wouldn't have to do exactly the same style as I did here. But really the reason I'm calling them 3 layers is because it's going to look like there's 3 layers. The brass that I'm going to use for the sun disc is going to be look like it's going behind the ocean here, which is going to be 18 gauge sterling. And then on top of that we're going to put this piece here. And one of the things I like to do with these sorts of pendants is I like to give it some three-dimensionality by having one component sticking out over the top of the frame a little bit. I find that that makes it look a little bit more 3D, and while this is kind of stylized, it'll make it just jump out at you a little bit more, so I think that'll add to it. But we'll have to punch a disc out of brass, and I'm going to use 18 gauge brass sheet as well, which is 1 millimeter, just like the silver sheet that I'm using, which is 1 millimeter. And then I pre-made a bail. If you're interested in seeing how to make this standard kind of bail, I'll put a link here for you. That's a useful kind of bail that I use a lot when I just have kind of simple pendants. So I found a little bit of scrap that I'm going to use. It was a little thicker than 18, so I rolled it out through the rolling mill a little bit, and I think I'll be able to get it off of there. I had to cut a bigger piece off of a new piece of 18 gauge sheet to get the palm tree, but I've already traced these a little bit just to save time, and so I will glue these onto the individual pieces and then we'll cut them out with a saw. So that'll probably, let's make the frame first, and then maybe even put a little jump ring on here. I'll probably use some 16 gauge round or something like that for that, which would be 1.3 millimeters. And then we'll start working on the individual components inside. So let's set this to the side for a moment. Let's do this. An easy way to find about how long of a piece you need is to use the formula pi times diameter equals circumference. And pi is a little bit more than 3.14. So you can kind of estimate by going straight across the diameter here once, twice, 3 times. So this is definitely long enough to go all the way around. So I'm going to file one end flat and let's start shaping it into a circle. You can use a miter vise jig if you want to for this. Oh, and if you're new to my channel, here's a little bit of information about my soldering setup, both solder and torch and flux and everything. All right. Find a ring there, This is a little work hardened because I ran it through the rolling mill, but it's not so work hardened that it's going to be a problem, I don't think. I'm going to bypass them on this a little bit. One goes right past the other one. Push them down, and let's tap it down on the small side of the mandrel here like this. So it's, if you do that, if you do it smaller than it's eventually going to be, you can gradually slide it up the mandrel. We'll start to get kind of in the size range we want to be. You always got to push it a little bit past how big it needs to be because it's going to spring back a little bit. I guess I should have checked to see if this ring mandrel is big enough to stretch it this far. We're pretty close already, so I think it will be. If not, we could just manually shape it if we needed to. I try to flip it over periodically so that it doesn't get too much of a taper in one direction since the mandrel is tapered. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this and then file it, and then we'll solder it together. I'm going to cut it a little bit longer because I think it's a tiny bit small still. And then I'm going to pull this open like that, and let's file that in flat. So let's go ahead. Somebody called this my Frankenpad. Okay, so I think I'm just going to set a little bit of solder on there. These pieces are a little big. Well, this one might work. You can, if you want to, make it into kind of a U shape if it's a longer, skinnier piece like this. That way we can just drape it right over that space there. Looks pretty good. Just kind of making sure it's nice and round. We don't want a wonky frame for this. Let's see how close we got on the sides. Pretty close. Good enough, I think. Alright, so let's find some 16 gauge around and a little bit here. Let's make a little jump ring for the top. I think I'll just use my bail making pliers. That'll make a pretty good sized one there, so let's do that. I think you could probably make a whole series of these in various different scenes, and I think they probably would sell really well at kind of a midline kind of price point. So, and you could change it up with, I'm not going to put a stone in this one, but you certainly could. You could even make the sun a stone if you wanted to. I've done that a few times with similar ones. There's a little piece of Baltic amber or something that makes for a nice sun, or citrine, a bright citrine. Okay, I'm just going to use a little bit of solder to close that ring up. I have any other little pieces floating around here. positive about that, so I'm going to cut a few more. One big mistake a lot of people do at the beginning, and I'm guilty of it as well, is picking up a random piece of metal in your workspace and assuming it's solder. Solder and thin sheet silver look pretty similar. So, and I leave little tiny cuts of silver here and there because I'm constantly trimming things off. And so you end up with some random pieces of metal that could be solder or could be sterling. Let me show you pick soldering. Pick soldering is one of those useful skills that everybody should learn once they get a little bit of experience under their belt. You can pick up a little ball of solder on the end of a titanium pick, and there's probably enough solder on this ring here to attach it as long as I get things heated correctly. So let's get the bigger ring up to temperature because it's got a little bit more mass to it, and then start including that. So it actually went on there just fine. I'm going to add a little bit just to reinforce it. But that's how you pick solder. So if you're interested in seeing the video about it, there's a link to it. I don't care that much about the bottom edge as long as I have enough. The top edge is the one that matters. We'll trim this bottom edge off after we get the top edge cut out. So I'm just going to try and find a good spot, and let's just use a little bit of super glue and glue that on. Okay, let's glue this palm tree on as well. We'll see how my sawing skills are tonight. Some days are better than others. You could probably get by with a little bit thinner sheet if you wanted to, seeing as silver is so high priced at the moment. I don't know how good of a palm tree that is, but it's going to have to do. Okay, should we go saw these out? Alright. Okay, I drilled a little hole kind of right above it, and I'm going to feed the saw through there. I have better luck when I'm cutting not from the outside edge. It's okay. Little palm tree. Let's go back to the other area. Sometimes you need to use your torch to burn off the paper, but this time I just peeled right off. So I think to get this to fit in there nicely, let's do this. Sometimes it's easier to get a really precise line if you use a little black marker. So that made a pretty decent line there. So I'm going to saw that out really quick and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I just cut that out and smoothed it a little bit with the file. That fits in there pretty nicely. So I really don't want a lot of excess solder slops, so I'm going to set this on top of some pieces of solder so that when I heat it, it's going to pull it up through into the crack, at least theoretically. Probably don't need that much. Okay, well, let's flux that, and then we should be able to get that to draw right up into that crack by heating from above. I might texture the water after this is all cleaned up, just to differentiate it between the other silver of the tree. And I might see if I might do something on the trunk here to give it some striations to make it look a little more. We'll see. Kind of like that. So I'll do some refining on filing and stuff to make sure it fits in there nicely. But our next step is going to be to cut out a disc out of some brass sheet. So let me grab some brass sheet. And this is about the same size, this particular peg for my disc cutter. It's pretty close to the right size for the sun on this one. Although you could make it whatever size you want, really, I suppose. The way a disc cutter works, at least this one, you stick your piece of metal in there, you put the peg in, and then you hit it really hard with a hammer. And I can't do it on my table here because it'll vibrate everything so badly that something might fall off, and I have to hit it really hard. And I don't have a stump yet. I'm going to make a stump one of these days, or at least something like a stump to pound on. And so I'm going to have to do this one on the floor, so I can't really film that. But I'm going to use a dead blow hammer and try and hit it in one shot to knock it through there. But brass is relatively hard, so I may or may not succeed. Be right back. Okay, you can see I knocked it out of there. It's a little scratched up, but we can polish that up. Now what I think I'm going to do here, kind of line this up like that. And we'll see if I can cut that nicely where I made those marks. Okay, let's see if I can see this well enough to do a decent job. Funny thing, the first one I was cutting, I got all the way through and I was shaping it a little with the file, and then I dropped it and I can't find it. But turns out my battery had died on my camera here, so I hadn't filmed it anyway. So let's just redo that. And this time I did a little marker on it to make it easier to see. That's actually much closer than I had last time. So I think what I'm going to do is, in order to make these kind of differentiate from each other so it looks like the sun is behind the waves, I'm going to taper down this edge a little bit so it's thinner there, right along the seam there. And then when we solder it on, I think it'll look a little bit behind it. So you can either use your file to do that. I'm probably going to use an abrasive white wheel on the Dremel. I think maybe if I clamp this in here a little bit so I'm less likely to drop it on the floor, we can avoid that whole crawling around again. At least I think. This just gives me a little something more to hold on to. So. Okay, let's go back and see how it looks. Okay, so I don't know if you'll be able to see on the camera or not, but because I tapered it down on the bottom, it really does look like it's coming from behind it, I think. So that's kind of what I want. I don't want a huge amount of excess solder flowing up in here. And so I'm going to use this little bit smaller piece on the back side. And we'll solder that on there. Alright, let's cool that off. I may have had a little more flow upwards than I wanted, and if that's the case, I'm going to clean it up a little bit with the rotary tool. Let's see what I can do there. Or I could just leave it be. I think I'm just going to leave it be. So now we need to solder that in there. This needs to have a little bit different angle. I want it to go that way. That looks pretty nice. So I'm gonna do a little cleanup of this palm tree before we solder him in, and I think I'll come back and we'll do some little striations going up the trunk to give it a little bit more palm tree-ish look. So I thought about using the eye from my letter stamps to make the little lines, but oftentimes I use this little tiny thing that I'm not sure where I got this, but it works pretty well for doing stuff like this. Let's do kind of a light tap. Well, let's move some of this stuff out of the way and see how it looks. That's cute, I think. So I think the way I might want to texture this bottom part is using a little diamond burr. You can get these sets of diamond burrs online for about $13, $15, depending upon where you look. But I think what I'll do is, before I solder this down on here, I'm going to rough this up over here. So, and I'll use this pointy one to get kind of in where the solder joint is to clean that up. So I'm just going to rough that up and then I'll be right back. Okay, I've got a diamond burr in there. I think that looks kind of nice. It's sort of glittery. Okay, let's see if we can go solder that other thing together. Okay, that's kind of how I'm visualizing this. So I'm going to go ahead. I really don't want a lot of excess solder here, especially flowing into this diamond textured kind of area. So I'm going to pick solder a little bit of solder on the back of here, here, and then down at the very bottom of this. So we'll do that, and then we'll just position it. Hopefully we'll have a good thing going. So I think it was this one and this one. Let's cool that off and see if everything is on there. So after I polish this and pickle it and polish it, I may have to go back and redo some texturing there. We'll see how it looks, but I'll definitely polish this up, polish that up. Let's put that bail on. So I just put a little easy paste solder there, and sometimes I'll do it with hard, but I made my ring pretty small and my bail relatively big, so I didn't have a lot of space to work with, and I didn't want to run the risk of soldering it to it. Perish the thought. Let's see if we did it okay. Yep. Looks good. So I'm going to let that pickle and get it polished up, and I may retexture, like I said, down here. We'll see. But let's get that cleaned up and see how it turns out. Okay, it's getting late, but I got it mostly polished up. I went back and I retextured this inner part a little bit because it had polished a little bit away, just to make it stand out from the sun mostly and the palm tree. But I think it turned out okay. Like I said, lots of different variations you could do. Probably many more than I just thought of on these ones. So give it a try and tell me what you think. Tell me what you would have done differently. I always love to hear your tricks and things you do to make things easier. So let me know what you think. I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well that was a universal 3-layer pendant. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, it would be great if you'd hit the like button before you go. That really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that immensely. I would also like it if you go visit my main YouTube channel page. I have tons of videos over there. I've got 660 plus now. I do 3 per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, one on Saturday. And so there's a constant stream of good, useful metalsmithing information. anywhere from beginner projects up to prong settings that are kind of challenging. So there's almost certainly something good and useful for you to find over there. So check it out. And I think it'd be great if you hit the subscribe button as well. It makes it much easier to find my content, and I think you'll find that it's useful. So thanks in advance for that. I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. They not only give me financial support, they've created this lovely community over there with a lot of cool people who are at various levels of metalsmithing skills, and we kind of share experiences and ideas and show each other what we're working on. It's a great place and a nice learning environment. So I specifically wanted to thank a new one. I have Karen L. Thank you for signing up. I really appreciate your support. I hope that you find, as I have, that it's a great group of people over there. So take some time getting to know some of those people and visit the Discord server and introduce yourself. So thanks again for all of you. You are awesome. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 29,400, I think, which is amazing. Thank you for that. We're getting close to 30,000, which I never in my wildest dreams would have thought would happen. So thanks for that. Thank you also for the really nice comments, the good video suggestions, sharing how you got into it, things that are tricks that you've learned that are useful. All of that stuff makes my channel a great learning environment, and I appreciate that because that's what I want it to be. Thank you also for the financial support, the buy me a coffees, the super thanks, the merch purchases, buying my ebooks. All of that makes my channel sustainable, and I couldn't do it without your help, so thank you for that. The video description has some important links. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks or some other cool merch. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out a little bit more about that community. And there's a link to my newest ebook. It's a guide to 2025's tutorials. It has a page for each of the ones that I did. There's over 170, and there's a link from each of those pages to the tutorial itself, in addition to extra information about the tutorial that I may not have mentioned in the project itself. So there's a picture of the sketch that I drew, there's a picture of the final outcome, a difficulty rating, a list of materials to make it, stone information, notes I took about it, including things like would I have done it differently if I was to approach it again, or what did I learn from it, or did I think it was a success, or was it a project that I'll never do again? So stuff like that. It's a great way to have a bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a super nice way to support my channel. So get yourself one of those. I've actually done it for 3 different years, 2023, 2024, and 2025. If you go to the merch store, there's a link to get all 3 in the same package for a discount of $15 off. So check that out too if you're interested. All right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.